billions of miles away from the comforting warmth of our sun, plunging through an eternal, freezing darkness at an incomprehensible speed of over 38,000 miles per hour. A tiny, fragile machine made of 1970s aluminum, gold, and wire is currently carrying the only physical proof that humanity ever existed into the uncharted void of interstellar space. But what happens when the radioactive heart of this lone wanderer finally beats its last, leaving it completely dead and silent in the dark? More importantly, who or what is mathematically predicted to intercept this golden message in a bottle millions of years from now, and what single, terrifying detail did the scientists intentionally leave off the record to protect our fragile planet from the unknown? We will uncover the answer to this chilling cosmic mystery at the very end of our journey today. So, wrap yourself in the quiet of the night. Let your mind drift away from the atmosphere of Earth and stay with me until the final moments to uncover the ultimate fate of our most distant emissary. Welcome to Sleep Time Narratives. Here, we leave behind the frantic noise, the blinding artificial lights, and the exhausting, relentless pace of the modern waking world. We journey together into the quiet, forgotten, and beautifully dark corners of natural history, science, and the cosmos, exploring environments that demand absolutely nothing from us but our peaceful observation. Tonight, we are embarking on the ultimate departure. We are leaving the terrestrial continents, the crowded cities, and the skies of Earth behind entirely. We are venturing into the absolute, unforgiving extreme of deep space, stepping into a sensory void where time stretches into incomprehensible eons, and silence is the only physical law. Settle in. Let the tension drain completely from your muscles. Unclench your jaw and prepare to follow the solitary path of a mechanical ghost sailing through the eternal night. To truly comprehend the magnitude of this silent journey, we must first return to the beginning. We must travel back to the late summer of 1977, a time when human ambition reached out to grasp the very edges of our solar system. On a launch pad in Cape Canaveral, Florida, sitting atop a massive Titan IIIe rocket, Voyager 1 waited for its moment to leave the Earth forever. The launch was a spectacle of raw, violent kinetic energy. Millions of pounds of thrust tore the sky apart, a deafening roar of controlled explosions pushing the fragile probe up through the dense, heavy layers of our atmosphere. It fought against the relentless, crushing pull of Earth's gravity, burning through the sky until the blue faded into the dark, bruising purple of the stratosphere, and finally into the pure, flawless black of the vacuum. And then, a profound transformation occurred. The moment Voyager 1 slipped the surly bonds of Earth and crossed the threshold into the vacuum of space, the roaring violence of its birth was instantly, permanently silenced. Sound, as we know it, is merely a mechanical wave, a vibration of molecules traveling through a medium like air or water. In the vacuum of space, there is no air. There are no molecules to vibrate. There is absolutely nothing to carry a sound wave. From the moment its engines shut down, Voyager 1 entered a state of absolute, unbroken acoustic deprivation. If you were floating directly beside it, you could not hear the hum of its instruments, the whir of its gyroscopes, or the clicks of its cameras. It became a silent ghost, a technological phantom slipping quietly into the abyssal ocean of the cosmos. Voyager 1 is not a sleek, aerodynamic starship from a science fiction film. Because there is no air resistance in space, it does not need wings or a streamlined hull. It is a strange, jagged, utilitarian assembly of human engineering. At its center is a 10-sided structural ring, holding the delicate computers and tape recorders that command the mission. Above this ring sits a massive 12-foot wide high-gain antenna, a pristine white dish that must be pointed exactly toward Earth at all times, acting as the spacecraft's only voice and ear. Extending outward on a long, slender boom is the beating heart of the machine, the radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Because solar panels are completely useless in the deep, lightless reaches of the outer solar system, Voyager is powered by the steady, warm decay of plutonium-238. For nearly half a century, this glowing pellet of radioactive material has provided the heat and electricity, keeping the probe alive in an environment that hovers just a few degrees above absolute zero. The trajectory of this lonely machine was dictated by a phenomenon known as the Grand Tour. In the late 1970s, astronomers realized that the giant outer planets of our solar system, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, were moving into a rare geometric alignment that occurs only once every 175 years. This alignment allowed a spacecraft to visit all of them in a single, continuous journey by using a maneuver called a gravity assist. As Voyager 1 approached a massive planet like Jupiter, it did not fire rockets to speed up. Instead, it stole a microscopic fraction of the planet's orbital momentum, riding the crushing gravitational wave of the gas giant to slingshot itself outward, multiplying its velocity to speeds impossible to achieve with traditional fuel alone. Imagine the sheer, terrifying majesty of that first encounter. In the silent dark, Voyager 1 approached Jupiter, the king of the planets. The visual scale of this gas giant defies human logic. It is a churning, violent sphere of hydrogen and helium, so massive that over 1,000 Earths could fit comfortably inside it. The probe glided silently past swirling atmospheric storms the size of continents, brushing the edge of the Great Red Spot, an anticyclonic hurricane that has been raging for centuries. It navigated the deadly, invisible radiation belts that surround the planet, its fragile 1970s electronics bombarded by highly charged particles. But the math was perfect. The gravity of Jupiter grabbed the tiny probe and violently threw it outward, accelerating it to tens of thousands of miles per hour, aiming it perfectly toward the ring jewel of the solar system. When Voyager 1 reached Saturn, the mission took a decisive, sacrificial turn. While its twin, Voyager 2, was programmed to continue the grand tour to Uranus and Neptune, Voyager 1 had a different, more specific target: Saturn's largest moon, Titan. Scientists knew Titan had a thick, opaque atmosphere, and they desperately wanted to see what lay beneath the orange smog. To achieve the perfect trajectory for a close flyby of Titan, Voyager 1 had to dive beneath the spectacular rings of Saturn and swing sharply around the moon. This specific gravitational slingshot was a one-way ticket. The maneuver permanently altered the probe's course, flinging it upward and entirely out of the ecliptic plane, the flat, invisible disk upon which all the planets orbit the Sun. With that single, silent swing around Titan, Voyager 1 abandoned the planets forever. It became a rogue object, aimed directly at the empty, uncharted void of interstellar space. As it flew away from the planetary neighborhood, the probe looked back. On the 14th of February 1990, when Voyager 1 was over 4 billion miles away from home, the legendary astronomer Carl Sagan requested that NASA send a command to the spacecraft. He asked them to turn the cameras around one last time and take a family portrait of the solar system. The probe slowly pivoted its mechanical neck, pointing its lenses back toward the fading warmth of the sun, and snapped a series of photographs. In one of those images, suspended in a scattered ray of sunlight, reflecting off the camera optics, was a tiny pale blue dot. It was a fraction of a pixel in size, barely distinguishable from the noise of the image sensor. That dot was Earth. That microscopic speck of pale blue was the sum total of all human history. Every empire that has ever risen and fallen, every war ever fought, every piece of art ever created, every human being who has ever lived and died, all of it happened on that tiny, fragile mote of dust. Suspended in an infinitely vast and indifferent cosmos. Looking at that image, the true scale of the interstellar drift begins to settle over the mind like a heavy, comforting blanket. Our daily anxieties, our stresses, the frantic pace of our modern lives, they all shrink into absolute insignificance when viewed from 4 billion miles away. The pale blue dot is a reminder of our incredible fragility, but also of our profound unity. In the face of the overwhelming dark void, that tiny dot is everything we have. Letting go of the ego and embracing this cosmic perspective is the ultimate release. It untethers the mind, allowing it to float freely in the dark, unburdened by the microscopic struggles of the surface world. After taking that final philosophical photograph, Voyager 1 powered down its cameras forever. It no longer needed eyes. The space ahead of it was a profound, featureless dark. For decades it sailed through the heliosphere, the massive, invisible bubble of plasma generated by our sun. The sun constantly blows a stream of charged particles outward in all directions, creating a protective shield that pushes back against the interstellar wind. But as the probe flew further and further away, the influence of the sun began to wane. The solar wind slowed down, becoming thin and weak. And then, in August of 2012, something miraculous happened. Voyager 1 became the first human-made object in history to cross the heliopause. It pushed through the very boundary of our solar system and entered the interstellar medium. The instruments on board recorded a sudden, sharp spike in cosmic rays and a drastic change in the density of the surrounding plasma. The probe was no longer swimming in the water of our sun. It had breached the surface and entered the ancient, unadulterated cosmic ocean. It was now surrounded by material that had been expelled by giant stars that lived and died millions of years before the Earth was even formed. It was officially adrift in the space between the stars. The isolation of this environment is staggeringly beautiful. Voyager 1 is currently over 15 billion miles away from Earth. It is a distance so unfathomably vast that light itself, the fastest entity in the universe, traveling at 186,000 miles per second, takes over 22 hours just to cross the gap. When engineers on Earth send a simple radio command to the probe, they must wait nearly a full day for the signal to reach it, and another full day just to hear the faint, microscopic whisper of a reply. It is the ultimate exercise in patience. It is a conversation spanning the very fabric of the cosmos. But as the decades pass, the radioactive heart of the probe is slowly failing. The plutonium-238 that powers the spacecraft decays by about 0.8% every year. To keep the probe alive and transmitting data from the interstellar medium, NASA engineers have been forced to slowly, methodically amputate its functions. They have turned off the heaters. They have shut down the gyroscopes. They have powered down the scientific instruments one by one, sacrificing the probe's senses just to keep its radio transmitter whispering into the dark for a few more years. Eventually, the power will drop below the absolute minimum required to sustain the core systems. The transmitter will fall silent. The final, faint signal from Voyager 1 will wash over the Earth, and then there will be nothing but the quiet. The machine will freeze solid, reaching the ambient temperature of deep space, hovering just above absolute zero. Yet, the death of its electronics is not the end of its journey. According to the laws of physics, an object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. Because the space between the stars is virtually empty, there is no friction to slow the probe down. Voyager 1 will continue to drift through the Milky Way galaxy, perfectly preserved in the freezing vacuum, traveling at 38,000 miles per hour for billions of years. It will outlive the very civilization that built it. It will likely outlive the Earth itself, floating serenely through the dark long after our sun has expanded into a red giant and swallowed our pale blue dot. This brings us to the most poignant, beautiful aspect of the Voyager mission. Bolted to the side of the spacecraft is a 12-inch, gold-plated copper phonograph record. This is the Golden Record, a literal message in a bottle cast into the cosmic ocean. Knowing that the probe would survive for eons in the dark, Carl Sagan and a team of scientists curated a time capsule designed to communicate the story of our world to any extraterrestrial intelligence that might find it in the distant future. The record contains the sounds of Earth, the gentle rustling of wind, the heavy patter of rain, the rhythmic beating of a human heart, the crashing of ocean waves, and the sound of a mother comforting her child. It contains greetings spoken in 55 different human languages, a chorus of voices from a tiny blue planet reaching out into the dark to say, "We are here." It contains music, the universal language of mathematics and emotion, ranging from the intricate mathematical perfection of Johann Sebastian Bach to the raw, pulsing energy of Chuck Berry. It is a portrait of a species that is deeply flawed, yet capable of profound beauty and boundless curiosity. Imagine this golden disk, glittering faintly in the starlight, drifting perfectly undisturbed through the silent void. It is the ultimate monument to humanity. It requires no maintenance. It feels no pain. It simply exists, carrying the echoes of our rainstorms and our music through the obsidian halls of the galaxy. As you lie in the quiet of your own space, allow the serene, eternal journey of Voyager 1 to guide your mind into a state of profound rest. The universe is unfathomably large, and the distances between the stars are vast, dark, and perfectly silent. There is an incredible peace in knowing that no matter what happens on the surface of our planet, no matter how chaotic our daily lives may become, there is a small, golden piece of us drifting safely through the eternal night. You do not need to steer the ship. You do not need to fight the current. You can simply let go, surrender to the gentle pull of cosmic gravity, and allow yourself to drift. But what of the chilling mystery we uncovered at the very beginning of our journey? Who is mathematically predicted to find this golden record, and what terrifying detail did we intentionally hide from them? The uncomfortable truth of interstellar travel is that space is overwhelmingly, terrifyingly empty. The odds of Voyager 1 randomly colliding with an alien spacecraft or accidentally entering an inhabited star system are infinitesimally small. It will drift through the void for 40,000 years before it even comes close to another star, passing a red dwarf called Gliese 445 at a distance of 1.6 light-years. Astrophysicists who have mapped the trajectory of the probe and calculated the sheer, staggering immensity of the distances involved have come to a haunting conclusion. Given the billion-year lifespan of the Golden Record and the unfathomable emptiness of the galaxy. The civilization mathematically most likely to intercept Voyager 1 and decode its golden message is us, millions of years in the future. If humanity manages to survive, evolve, and master interstellar travel, our distant descendants may be the ones who finally catch up to the slow-moving probe. They will pull it from the void, an ancient, sacred relic from the cradle of their civilization, and listen to the primitive sounds of the earth they left behind. And the single, terrifying detail left off the record? When compiling the images, sounds, and greetings to represent humanity, the committee made a deliberate, calculated decision to exclude any mention or imagery of war, nuclear explosions, poverty, or disease. They omitted the darker, violent nature of our species. The Golden Record presents an idealized, peaceful, and perhaps deceptive portrait of Earth. It was a choice born of hope, but also of fear. The scientists reasoned that if a truly advanced, predatory alien civilization were to intercept the probe, we should not provide them with visual evidence that our species is fractured, prone to self-destruction, and potentially hostile. The omission was a silent, desperate plea for peace, a shield of curated innocence cast into a dark, unknown universe that may not be as empty as we think. As the narrative of our cosmic emissary comes to a close, let the immense, quiet reality of deep space wash over you. The mysteries of the universe are vast, but they are patient. The stars do not rush. The planets do not hurry. The interstellar drift is a journey of eternal, unbroken slowness. Allow your breathing to match this cosmic rhythm. Slow, deep, and steady. Let the thoughts of the day fade into the background, like a tiny blue dot disappearing into the glare of the sun. You are floating in the dark, safe, silent, and completely at peace. Rest now. Let the silence of the void carry you down into the deepest, most undisturbed slumber. As we drift down from the bruised, cloudy heights of the prehistoric sky, sinking below the dense, overarching canopy of the ancient swamp, the very nature of the air around us begins to undergo a profound and staggering transformation. You have left behind the thin, frantic, and polluted atmosphere of the modern world. Here, suspended just a few feet above the surface of the endless dark water, you are breathing the sky of the Carboniferous period. This is an atmosphere unlike anything humanity has ever experienced, a primal and intoxicating mixture of gases that fundamentally dictates the impossible scale of the life thriving within it. To understand the absolute dominance of this environment, we must first understand the breadth of the Earth itself. In our modern timeline, the air you breathe is composed of roughly 21% oxygen. It is a stable, reliable mixture that fuels our bodies and keeps our modern ecosystems in a state of delicate equilibrium. But here, 300 million years in the past, the chemical composition of the planet has been driven to a magnificent, absolute extreme. The oxygen levels in this ancient swamp have surged to nearly 35%. This staggering increase in atmospheric oxygen changes the very physics of the air. It is not just a gas you inhale, it is a heavy, tangible presence. The air here feels incredibly thick, rich, and deeply invigorating. With every imaginary breath you take in this ancient world, your lungs are flooded with a surplus of pure, unadulterated energy. It is an atmosphere that hums with biological potential, a hyper-oxygenated ocean of air that makes the blood run faster and allows the creatures of this world to push the boundaries of evolutionary scale. But why is the air so intoxicatingly rich? The answer lies beneath the surface of the dark water below us, in a bizarre and temporary flaw in the Earth's biological recycling system. Look out across the vast, unbroken expanse of the swamp. Towering, scale-covered trees rise from the water in their billions, an endless, planetary-scale forest of unimaginable density. For millions of years, these colossal plants have been performing the vital work of photosynthesis, pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, using the carbon to build their massive trunks, and exhaling pure oxygen back into the sky. In a balanced ecosystem, when a tree dies, it falls to the forest floor and rots. Fungi and bacteria break down the wood, slowly releasing the stored carbon back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, completing the cycle. But in the Carboniferous period, the cycle is broken. The world is covered in massive, sprawling wetlands, and the trees that thrive here have evolved a new, incredibly tough structural polymer called lignin to support their massive height. The Earth has never seen lignin before. More importantly, the microscopic life of the Earth, the bacteria and the fungi, have not yet evolved the specific enzymes required to break it down. When these towering giants reach the end of their lives, they do not rot. They lose their grip in the muddy soil, crashing down into the deep, anoxic waters of the swamp. And there, they simply sink. Millions upon millions of massive trees sink into the dark water, piling up on the swamp floor, perfectly preserved in the oxygen-starved depths. The carbon they pulled from the air is trapped with them, buried beneath the mud, layer upon heavy layer, effectively locking it away from the atmosphere. Because the carbon is buried and not released back into the air, the oxygen left behind simply accumulates century after century, millennium after millennium, building the hyper-oxygenated atmosphere that wraps around us right now. It is a beautiful, silent accumulation. The dark, peat-filled waters below us are the ancient, unrotting graves of the first great forests, slowly being crushed by the weight of time into the massive, planetary seams of coal that our modern civilization will one day rely upon. You are floating above the very birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, watching it form in absolute, prehistoric silence. Because the air is so heavy with this accumulated oxygen and supersaturated with the endless humidity of the global swamp, the environment manifests as a physical entity. The fog in this world is not a fleeting morning mist that burns away with the sunrise. It is a permanent geographical feature. Imagine looking out over the surface of the water. The swamp is pitch black, a still obsidian mirror stained dark by the tannins of millions of submerged, unrotting trees. Rolling slowly over this flawless black surface is a thick, glowing white mist. The contrast is deeply mesmerizing. The fog is so dense that it behaves more like a liquid than a gas. It pours over the massive, arching roots of the ancient trees, pooling in the hollows and drifting in heavy, slow-motion waves across the dark water. This fog is a sanctuary of sensory insulation. In the waking world, our senses are constantly bombarded by sharp lines, fast movements, and harsh directional light. But here, the thick white mist acts as a massive atmospheric diffuser. It catches the dim, ambient light filtering down from the heavy canopy above and scatters it perfectly, turning the entire landscape into a soft, glowing, shadowless realm. The sharp edges of the world are completely erased. Your eyes do not need to struggle to focus on distant horizons because there is no horizon. There is only the immediate, intimate space around you, wrapped in a thick, protective blanket of white vapor. As the visual environment softens and blurs into a peaceful, static hum, the auditory landscape of the Carboniferous swamp takes over. The sheer density of the air and the heavy presence of the fog completely alter the way sound travels. High-frequency noises are instantly absorbed and swallowed by the mist. The sharp, frantic sounds of the modern world could not exist here. Instead, the fog acts as a colossal acoustic dampener, isolating the sounds of the swamp and wrapping them in a warm, resonant, and deeply comforting acoustic shell. Listen closely to the surface of the pitch-black water. Beneath the rolling white mist, the unrotting organic matter buried deep in the mud is undergoing its own slow chemical transformation. Trapped far below the oxygenated surface, anaerobic bacteria are slowly digesting the softer plant materials, producing pockets of natural marsh gas, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. These pockets of gas slowly work their way up through the heavy, ancient mud, eventually breaking free and rising to the surface. As they breach the dark water, they produce a sound that is the absolute essence of this prehistoric world. It is the slow, rhythmic, and incredibly deep bubbling of the swamp. Bloop, plop. The sound is not a chaotic boiling, but a slow, methodical, and deeply resonant percussion. Each bubble of swamp gas rising to the surface acts like a natural bass drum. The sound resonates through the thick, humid air, echoing softly off the trunks of the surrounding giant trees. It is a heavy, liquid sound, rich with low-frequency vibrations that you can almost feel in the center of your chest. Bloop. There is an incredible, hypnotic randomness to this rhythm. It cannot be predicted or rushed. It is the sound of the earth slowly, patiently exhaling. A bubble rises to the left, a deep, hollow popping sound that echoes in the fog. A moment of heavy, perfect silence passes. Then, another bubble breaches the surface to the right, slightly deeper, slightly heavier. This deep, rhythmic bubbling is the perfect acoustic anchor for a restless mind. It draws your attention away from the complex, spiraling thoughts of the day and grounds you entirely in the physical, tactile reality of the ancient water. You find yourself simply waiting for the next bubble to rise, and in that waiting, the tension in your body begins to dissolve into the thick, heavy air. As we hover here, suspended between the glowing white mist and the pitch-black water, the true magic of the Carboniferous period begins to take hold. You are insulated from the rest of the universe. The towering, scaly trees stand like silent, ancient sentinels, guarding the perimeter of your vision. The heavy, hyper-oxygenated air fills your lungs with a deep, primal vitality, yet simultaneously commands your heart rate to slow down, matching the patient, ancient rhythm of the earth itself. There is no wind to disturb the fog. There are no sudden changes in temperature. The environment is locked in a state of warm, perfect, and unbroken stasis. The slow release of the swamp gas continues, a gentle, liquid metronome marking the passage of time in a world where time has practically ceased to exist. Allow yourself to sink into this heavy, muffled acoustic space. Let the glowing white mist wrap around you, obscuring the future and the past, leaving only the profoundly peaceful present. You are completely hidden. You are entirely safe. The earth is breathing a slow, deep sigh, and you are invited to breathe along with it, sinking deeper and deeper into the warm, protective embrace of the primeval fog. As we float effortlessly above the still, pitch-black surface of the ancient swamp, our perspective begins to slowly, seamlessly shift. Imagine a perfectly smooth, stabilized vertical pan, lifting your gaze away from the dark waters and the rolling white mist, tracing the lines of the environment upward into the heavy, hyper-oxygenated sky. We are leaving the immediate ground level to explore the staggering, towering verticality of the Carboniferous world. What rises before us is not a forest as you know it. There are no familiar oaks, no ancient pines, no broad-leafed maples to offer a recognizable silhouette against the cloudy gloom. Instead, we are surrounded by the true titans of this era, the colossal architectural pillars of the prehistoric Earth. These are the lepidodendron, known to paleobotanists as the scale trees. To comprehend the sheer scale of these organisms, you must recalibrate your understanding of plant life. As our gaze travels upward, panning up the trunks of these ancient flora, we realize they are towering 100-foot-tall ancient trees. They stand like massive, unyielding columns supporting the bruised and heavy sky. In the modern world, a tree of this immense height takes centuries to grow, building dense rings of hard, unforgiving wood layer by slow layer. But the lepidodendron are an evolutionary anomaly. They are, in fact, not true trees at all, but colossal, overgrown relatives of the tiny club mosses that currently grow no taller than a few inches on modern forest floors. Through the sheer, unbridled power of the Earth's hyper-oxygenated atmosphere, these primitive mosses have exploded to the size of skyscrapers. As we zoom in, visualizing the hyper-realistic macro details of the trunks, a startling and beautiful alien texture is revealed. They don't have bark like modern trees. The rough, protective, and deeply grooved exterior that you associate with the forests of today has not yet been invented by nature. Instead, the entire surface of these towering monoliths is covered in beautiful, diamond-shaped green scales that look like reptile skin. The visual is deeply mesmerizing. The trunk appears as if it belongs to a slumbering 100-foot serpent standing on its tail. These scales are actually the scars left behind by leaves. As the lepidodendron grows rapidly toward the canopy, it sheds its lower leaves, leaving behind these perfectly geometric, interlocking diamond patterns that spiral elegantly up the entirety of the massive trunk. The color is not the dull, dead brown of modern bark, but a deep, vibrant, living green. In the soft, diffused glow of the permanent swamp fog, the scales catch the ambient light, giving the entire forest a subtle, organic luminescence. This reptilian texture fundamentally changes the auditory landscape of the ancient world. If you were to walk through a modern forest during a rainstorm, the sound of water hitting rough bark is a dull, absorbed thud. But here, the physics of sound and water interact entirely differently with the smooth, geometric scales. Listen closely to the acoustic environment surrounding us. As the incredibly thick, humid air of the swamp rises and meets the cooler temperatures of the upper canopy, it turns into water. There is a gentle, continuous hiss of moisture condensing on millions of scales. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated ASMR. Because the scales are smooth and slightly waxy, the water does not soak in immediately. It gathers, it beads up. Millions upon billions of microscopic droplets form on the tips of the diamond patterns, merging together in slow motion. When the droplets become too heavy to hold on to the vertical surface, they begin to slide. The sound of this sliding moisture across the scaly trunks creates a continuous, high-frequency static that completely fills the acoustic space. It is a soft, enveloping white noise that acts as an impenetrable audio barrier, shielding your mind from any sharp, intrusive thoughts. It is the sound of the earth sweating, a massive, planetary exhalation of pure water vapor turning back into liquid. This delicate hiss is anchored by a heavier, deeply rhythmic percussion. As the water travels down the 100-foot trunks, the droplets combine into small rivulets, cascading from one diamond scale to the next, until they finally break free from the wood entirely. You can hear them dripping heavily into the water below. Plip, plop. This is not the chaotic splashing rush of a modern thunderstorm. It is a slow, heavy, and mesmerizingly consistent rhythm. The drops are massive, swollen by the thick atmosphere, and when they strike the pitch-black, still water at the base of the trees, the resonance is profound. The sound echoes softly through the dense fog, overlapping with the distant, low-frequency bubbling of the swamp gas. Imagine layering these acoustic frequencies in a timeline, the deep, bass-heavy bubbles rising from the mud beneath, and the crisp, rhythmic, heavy droplets falling from the canopy above, all tied together by the continuous, soothing hiss of the condensing mist. It is a flawless, natural symphony of water, a masterpiece of auditory insulation. As our perspective continues to drift upward, following the hypnotic spiral of the green scales, we finally reach the canopy. The lepidodendron do not possess the sprawling, complex, fractal branching of an oak or a maple. Their trunks remain entirely straight and unbranched for over 90 feet, bursting only at the very apex into a strange, umbrella-like crown of simple, bifurcating branches. Suspended from these high branches are long, grass-like leaves, some reaching over 3 feet in length, hanging downward like a massive, weeping mane of dark green hair. Because this is a world before the evolution of seeds or flowers, there are no bright colors up here. There are no fruits to attract animals, and there are no birds to sing in the high branches. The reproduction of this ancient forest is entirely alien and completely silent. Hanging from the tips of the high branches are massive, cone-like structures. When the time is right, these cones do not drop seeds. They release clouds of microscopic spores into the heavy air. Imagine a slow-motion shot of this event. A gentle shift in the heavy, oxygen-rich wind shakes the canopy, and millions of golden-green spores cascade from the high cones. They do not fall straight down. They are caught in the thick, humid fog, drifting and swirling like glowing underwater dust motes. The spores filter slowly through the misty shafts of ambient light, mixing with the falling water droplets, painting the air itself with a soft, ethereal texture. This silent golden rain of life drifts endlessly down toward the dark water, ensuring the unbroken continuation of the massive swamp. Hovering here in the mid-canopy, surrounded by thousands of these towering, scaly pillars, the sheer repetition of the environment becomes a powerful sedative. No matter which direction you look, the visual is the same. The endless vertical geometry of the diamond-scaled trunks fading away into the glowing white mist. There is no end to the forest, and there is no beginning. It simply exists, a perfect, unchanging pattern that captures the weary eye and commands it to rest. The air up here is incredibly clean, carrying only the sharp, fresh scent of pure oxygen, damp earth, and wet, living green matter. With every deep, slow breath you take, this pristine air washes through your body, slowing your pulse and coaxing your nervous system into a state of profound metabolic peace. You are suspended in a world that is entirely devoid of urgency. The trees do not hurry to grow. They simply stretch toward the muted light over centuries. The water does not rush. It simply condenses and falls in its own perfect time. Allow the immensity of the scale trees to anchor you. Let the gentle, continuous hiss of the condensing moisture wash away the remnants of your waking day. Focus entirely on the heavy, rhythmic dripping. letting each resonant drop pull you deeper and deeper into a state of total relaxation. The Carboniferous forest is a fortress of fog and wood, holding you perfectly safe in its ancient, unyielding embrace. Sink into the heavy air, let the white noise of the prehistoric world take over, and surrender to the timeless, unbroken sleep of the deep past. As we remain suspended in this thick, hyper-oxygenated atmosphere, our senses fully adjusted to the muffled acoustics and the blinding, beautiful white vapor of the ancient swamp, we begin to notice that the air above us is not entirely empty. The thick, glowing white mist, rolling slowly over pitch-black, still water, hides an entire ecosystem in its upper reaches. We have spent our time looking down at the dark, bubbling surface of the swamp and the massive, scaly trunks of the ancient trees. But now, it is time to turn our attention upward, into the impenetrable, glowing canopy of the fog. In our modern world, the sky is a place of rapid, frantic motion. Birds dart and dive with nervous, twitchy energy, and tiny insects buzz erratically, their wings beating at frequencies so high they become an aggressive, irritating whine to the human ear. But here, in the Carboniferous period, the rules of aviation are governed by an entirely different set of physical laws. The air is so rich with oxygen, nearly 35%, that the fog is almost a physical entity. This incredible density changes the way creatures move through the sky. Flight is no longer a desperate, frantic struggle against gravity. It is a slow, graceful, and majestic surrender to the heavy, supportive currents of the thick atmosphere. We are about to encounter one of the true masters of this ancient, heavy sky. As you look up into the glowing, featureless void of the white mist, a subtle shift begins to occur in the ambient light. It is not a sudden movement, but a gradual, agonizingly slow darkening of the vapor directly above you. A shadow passes through the thick fog overhead. Because the mist is so incredibly dense, the shadow is perfectly diffused, its edges completely blurred. It looks like a dark watercolor stain, slowly expanding and shifting across a canvas of wet, white paper. The sheer size of this silhouette is immediately staggering. It spans several feet across, moving with a deliberate, unhurried grace that instantly dispels any primal fear you might harbor. This is not a predator rushing in for a kill. This is a gentle giant, a monarch of the mist, simply passing through its vast, quiet kingdom. As the creature descends slightly, dropping below the thickest layer of the atmospheric vapor, its true form begins to slowly materialize out of the shadows. A giant dragonfly with a wingspan of a hawk glides past in extreme slow motion. This is Meganeura, one of the largest flying insects to ever exist in the history of our planet. But to call it a mere insect feels entirely inadequate. It is a biological marvel, a living testament to the absolute power of this hyper-oxygenated world. Watch as it drifts through the air right before you. The visual of its flight is deeply, profoundly hypnotic. In the modern world, a dragonfly's wings move so fast they are nothing but a blur, a transparent vibration. But because of the immense size of the Meganeura and the incredible, heavy density of the air it is pushing against, its wing beats are agonizingly, beautifully slow. You can see every single movement with absolute, perfect clarity. It glides past in extreme slow motion, allowing you to study the magnificent architecture of its ancient body. The creature possesses 4 massive, independent wings, stretching out wide to catch the heavy air. They are not merely transparent flaps. They are intricate structural masterpieces. A complex fractal network of dark, hardened veins runs through the wings, forming a perfect geometric lattice that provides immense strength and flexibility. Between these dark veins, the membranous material of the wings catches the ambient, glowing light of the fog. It flashes with subtle, iridescent hues of deep, metallic green, bruised purple, and rich, oily bronze. As the creature moves, these colors shift and ripple, a slow-motion kaleidoscope of prehistoric beauty reflecting the quiet majesty of the swamp. Because the humidity in this world is absolute, the creature's wings are adorned with microscopic beads of condensation. Millions of tiny water droplets cling to the biological glass of its wings, glittering like diamond dust in the muted light. With every slow, powerful downward sweep of its four wings, a faint mist of this condensation is thrown off into the air, creating tiny, swirling vortexes of vapor that trail behind the gentle giant as it navigates the dark, ancient trees. Look at the body of the Meganeura. It is long, slender, and heavily armored in thick, segmented chitin that shines like polished, dark mahogany. Its massive compound eyes, dominating the front of its head, are not the erratic, darting eyes of a modern fly. They are deep, dark, and complex, absorbing every photon of the dim, scattered light in the fog. These eyes have witnessed the slow, unrotting accumulation of the peat bogs and the towering growth of the scale trees. They are the eyes of a creature perfectly, flawlessly adapted to an environment that will not exist for hundreds of millions of years. You might expect a creature of this terrifying scale to be a nightmare, a monstrous apex predator dominating the skies with violence. But in this specific, frozen moment of time, the Meganeura exhibits nothing but profound peace. It is not hunting. Its massive, spiked legs, designed for snatching smaller prey out of the air, are tucked neatly and aerodynamically against its long thorax. It has no interest in you, nor in the primitive amphibians resting on the logs far below. Right now, it is simply drifting on the heavy air currents. It is using the rising thermals of warm swamp gas and the dense, supportive blanket of the high oxygen atmosphere to coast effortlessly through the dark green shadows. This state of perfect, effortless gliding is the ultimate visual representation of letting go. The creature is not fighting the air, it is resting upon it. It is trusting the environment to hold its immense weight. As you watch the Meganeura drift lazily through the white mist, allow your own mind to adopt that exact same philosophy. Stop fighting the currents of your own thoughts. Stop trying to furiously flap your wings against the heavy burdens of the waking world. You are in a place where the atmosphere is thick enough to support you completely. You can simply tuck your anxieties away, stretch out your mind, and allow yourself to drift. While the visual of this giant dragonfly is incredibly soothing, it is the auditory footprint of the Meganeura that provides the most profound, inescapable comfort in this chapter of our journey. Remember that sound travels differently here. The thick fog and the heavy air act as a colossal acoustic dampener, stripping away high frequencies and amplifying the low, resonant vibrations of the world. When you imagine the sound of a giant insect, your mind likely conjures a terrifying, deafening, and frantic buzzing sound, the kind of noise that triggers an immediate, stressful adrenaline response. But the audio of the Meganeura is entirely different. It is not a frantic buzz, but a deep, resonant, helicopter-like thrumming that vibrates softly in the chest. Listen to the approach of the creature. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The sound is incredibly slow. Because the wings are so large and the air is so thick, the beat frequency is low enough that your ear can distinguish every individual sweep of the massive wings pushing against the atmosphere. It sounds like the distant, rhythmic chopping of a heavy, slow-moving wooden blade through the thick air. It is a sound of immense mechanical power, yet it is delivered with a soft, organic warmth that completely removes any sense of threat. As the gentle giant glides closer, passing directly overhead, this deep, resonant, helicopter-like thrumming begins to physically interact with your body. You do not just hear this sound, you feel it. It is a sub-bass frequency that bypasses the ears entirely and sinks directly into your sternum. It vibrates softly in the chest, creating a deeply tactile, heavy ASMR sensation that massages your nervous system into a state of absolute submission. It is the acoustic equivalent of a heavy, weighted blanket being slowly laid across your chest. The sound is steady, predictable, and incredibly grounding. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It harmonizes perfectly with the slow, rhythmic, and incredibly deep bubbling of natural swamp gas releasing from the dark water below. Together, the bubbling of the earth and the thrumming of the sky create a complete three-dimensional cocoon of low-frequency white noise. You are standing in the very center of this prehistoric symphony. The high, sharp, and stressful noises of your modern life, the sirens, the alarms, the digital pings, they simply cannot penetrate this ancient acoustic barrier. The thick glowing white mist rolling slowly over pitch black, still water has swallowed them entirely. There is only the heavy breath of the earth, the slow drip of condensation, and the majestic, unhurried thrumming of the ancient giant passing through the fog. Let the sound wash over you. Focus your entire attention on the slow, rhythmic beating of the Meganeura's massive wings. With every downward sweep, imagine the heavy, oxygen-rich air being pushed gently against your skin. It is a cool, damp, and incredibly pure breeze, carrying the ancient, earthy scent of the unrotting forest and the clean, metallic tang of the hyperoxygenated atmosphere. Watch as the creature continues its slow-motion journey. It begins to gradually recede into the white vapor, its iridescent colors slowly fading back into a dark, diffused silhouette. The deep, resonant thrumming begins to soften, growing fainter and fainter as the giant dragonfly glides further away, swallowed once again by the protective embrace of the permanent fog. The shadow fades, the sound diminishes to a whisper, and then slowly disappears entirely, leaving behind only the perfect heavy silence of the swamp. You are left alone once more in the incredibly humid, thick atmosphere, surrounded by the towering, scale-covered trees and the pitch-black water. But you do not feel abandoned. You feel a profound sense of privilege, having witnessed the quiet, majestic grace of a world that existed long before the first dinosaurs ever walked the earth. The environment commands you to rest. The slow, unbothered flight of the gentle giants is proof that there is no need to rush. There is no urgency here. The carbon is slowly piling up on the swamp floor, the oxygen is silently accumulating in the sky, and the thick white fog is standing guard over the absolute stillness of the world. Allow your muscles to completely relax. Let the deep, rhythmic vibrations you felt in your chest slow your own heartbeat, matching the ancient, patient pulse of the Carboniferous period. Sink deeper into the heavy, comforting dark, and let the timeless mist carry you away. We must now lower our gaze from the towering, scaly trunks of the ancient canopy and drift slowly down into the deepest, heaviest shadows of the Carboniferous world. We are descending to the very foundation of this primeval ecosystem, sinking through the thick, hyperoxygenated mist until we reach the forest floor. Down here at the absolute bottom of the global swamp, the fog is so dense it feels like a soft, woven fabric pressing gently against the earth. The light from the bruised sky above has been entirely filtered out by the interlocking branches and the endless white vapor, leaving the subterranean realm bathed in a perpetual, comforting twilight. This is a world built upon the unrotting remnants of giants. The ground beneath us is not made of soil as we understand it in the modern age. It is a profound, interwoven mattress of ancient, fallen vegetation. Because the earth has not yet evolved the microscopic organisms capable of breaking down the tough lignin of these primitive trees, the forest floor is a perfect, suspended archive of botanical history. Massive, scaly trunks lie crisscrossed in the dark water, covered in thick blankets of velvet green moss and ancient liverworts. The air here is incredibly still, heavy with the rich, clean scent of fresh water and damp earth. It is an environment of absolute stasis, a sanctuary where the frantic cycle of decay has been entirely paused by the sheer preserving nature of the deep swamp. As we hover in the quiet dark, our eyes fully adjusted to the soothing, shadowless gloom, a new acoustic texture begins to emerge from the silence. It is not the deep, booming croak of the amphibians, nor the low, helicopter-like thrumming of the giant winged insects passing miles above. It is something far more delicate, incredibly intricate, and deeply grounding. It is pure ASMR. Close your eyes and listen to the absolute stillness. Out of the heavy, muffled silence comes a slow, rhythmic, mesmerizing cascade of tiny clicks and the soft rustling of damp, dead leaves. Click, rustle, click, rustle. The sound is faint at first, barely a whisper against the quiet backdrop of the swamp, but it is perfectly steady. It is a mechanical, biological rhythm that moves with an unhurried, majestic deliberation. It is the sound of dozens, then hundreds of tiny, armored limbs carefully lifting and pressing down into the soft, unrotting vegetation of the forest floor. The acoustic signature is deeply tactile. You can almost feel the texture of the damp, leathery leaves being gently compressed, shifting microscopic fractions of an inch to accommodate a massive, moving weight. Through the thick, glowing white mist, a shadow begins to materialize. It is low to the ground, moving parallel to the dark water. As the fog parts around it, the magnificent architect of this sound is finally revealed. A massive 8-foot-long millipede navigates the giant fallen ferns. This is Arthropleura, the undisputed titan of the Carboniferous undergrowth. In the modern waking world, an insect of this unimaginable scale might invoke a primal fear, a shuddering instinct born of vulnerability. But here, in the heavy, insulated dreamscape of the ancient swamp, there is absolutely nothing to fear. The atmosphere of this epoch has allowed the arthropods to grow to colossal proportions, but it has not made them monsters. Arthropleura is a gentle giant, a slow-moving herbivorous wanderer that spends its entire century-long life peacefully grazing on the soft spores and decaying ferns that blanket the endless forest. Watch closely as this magnificent creature approaches. It does not scurry. It does not dart or twitch with the frantic nervous energy of the insects we know today. It moves with a hypnotic, undulating grace, entirely peaceful and unbothered. The sheer mechanics of its movement are a visual lullaby. Its body is composed of dozens of wide, flattened segments, each armored in thick, iron-clad plates that interlock with mathematical perfection. These plates are a deep, muted charcoal, catching the faintest glimmers of the ambient twilight and reflecting them with a soft, matte finish. Beneath this heavy, protective shell, countless pairs of legs operate in a state of flawless, synchronized choreography. As Arthropleura steps forward, a wave of motion travels down the entire 8-foot length of its body. It is a fluid, continuous ripple starting just behind its antennae and rolling backward, segment by segment, until it reaches the very tip of its tail. The visual repetition is staggering and deeply mesmerizing. You watch the wave form, travel, and dissipate over and over again. It is a biological metronome, a living pendulum swinging in perfect time with the slow, heavy heartbeat of the prehistoric Earth. With every undulating wave of its body, the acoustic environment is enriched. The slow, rhythmic, mesmerizing cascade of tiny clicks is the sound of its hard, chitinous claws finding purchase on the slick, damp wood of the fallen scale trees. It is a highly textured, high-frequency sound that cuts cleanly through the heavy, low-frequency hum of the distant swamp gas. The clicks are completely devoid of urgency. They are the footsteps of a creature that has absolutely no natural predators, a being that exists in a state of total environmental dominance and perfect safety. Listen to the soft rustling of damp, dead leaves as the massive millipede gently pushes through a dense thicket of ancient ferns. The leaves do not crack or snap. They are far too saturated with the eternal humidity of the swamp. Instead, they part with a soft, wet swish, sliding smoothly over the creature's armored back. The sound is incredibly insulating. It wraps around your mind like a heavy, weighted blanket. It is the auditory equivalent of being tucked safely into bed while a gentle, unthreatening force moves quietly through the dark outside your window. Let the philosophy of this creature sink into your consciousness. Arthroplora is a monument to the concept of unbothered existence. It does not worry about the passage of time. It does not harbor anxieties about the future or regrets about the past. Its entire world is the immediate tactile sensation of the damp earth beneath its feet and the soft, spore-laden ferns it consumes. It exists entirely in the present moment, navigating the labyrinth of the fallen forest with a slow, deliberate intention that demands absolutely nothing from the universe. As you lie in your own space, try to mirror the profound, heavy peace of the iron-clad wanderer. Imagine that your own thoughts, your own stresses and complex waking anxieties are like the frantic, tiny insects of the modern era. Let them go. Let them be absorbed and silenced by the thick, heavy fog of the Carboniferous period. Instead, align your breathing with the hypnotic, undulating grace of this ancient giant. Breathe in slowly as the wave of motion begins at the front of its body. Hold that breath gently as the ripple travels down its armored back. Exhale deeply and completely as the motion fades away into the dark, accompanied by the incredibly satisfying, delicate click of its feet finding rest on the wet wood. The massive millipede continues its journey, passing directly before us. You can see the intricate, microscopic details of its armor, the perfectly formed joints that allow for such fluid, aquatic motion on land. You can see the heavy, damp air condensing on its dark shell, forming tiny, perfect droplets of water that slowly run down its sides and fall silently into the soft moss below. It does not acknowledge our presence. We are merely ghosts observing a masterpiece of biological engineering, suspended in the deep, unyielding dark of deep time. The creature is entirely focused on its peaceful, solitary migration through the endless swamp. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the 8-foot-long wanderer begins to move past our vantage point. Its head disappears into a particularly dense bank of the glowing white mist. Segment by armored segment, it is swallowed by the fog. The visual of its body dissolves, melting back into the soft, shadowless gloom of the forest floor. But the sound remains. Long after the creature has vanished from sight, the pure ASMR of its passage lingers in the heavy air. The slow, rhythmic, mesmerizing cascade of tiny clicks and the soft rustling of damp, dead leaves continues to echo through the silence. The volume begins to drop, fading with an incredibly slow, satisfying acoustic decay. Click, rustle. The sounds grow further and further apart, perfectly mapping the creature's unhurried retreat into the deepest, untouched corners of the ancient world. You are left alone once more in the perfect, isolated dark, but the silence is no longer empty. It is filled with the comforting memory of the giant's passage, a deep, resonant reassurance that in this heavy, hyper-oxygenated world, there is only peace. There is only the slow, rhythmic march of deep time and the profound, unbroken safety of the fog. Allow the fading clicks to guide you down. Let the heavy, damp air settle over you and sink into a quiet, unbothered, and absolute rest. We have wandered far from the towering, scaly trunks of the central forest, leaving behind the slow, rhythmic rustle of the ironclad wanderers and the deep, helicopter-like thrumming of the giant insects in the mist. As we drift further into the heart of the Carboniferous period, the solid ground beneath us begins to surrender entirely to the ancient, sovereign power of the water. The dense, unbroken thickets of ferns slowly thin out, opening up into a vast, sprawling expanse of completely flooded terrain. This is the deep swamp, the very cradle of terrestrial life, and it is a place of such profound, heavy stillness that it demands absolute surrender from anyone who enters it. Look out across this boundless aquatic horizon. The water here is not the clear, sparkling blue of a modern mountain lake, nor is it the muddy, chaotic brown of a flooded river. It is an absolute, flawless, and terrifyingly beautiful pitch black. It is an obsidian mirror, stained to the color of midnight by the millions of tons of tannins leaching from the unrotting, submerged forests below. Because the wind is entirely trapped by the heavy, hyper-oxygenated atmosphere and the towering canopy above, the surface of this black water is completely undisturbed. There are no white caps. There are no chaotic ripples. It is perfectly flat, a flawless canvas of dark glass reflecting the thick, glowing white mist that rolls endlessly across its surface. Drifting upon this dark, glassy expanse are the colossal remnants of the scale trees. Massive, ancient trunks, some measuring over 10 feet in diameter and hundreds of feet in length, float silently in the black water. These are the giants that lost their grip in the soft, peat-filled earth and fell. But because the microscopic life of this era cannot yet digest their incredibly tough, lignin-laced wood, they do not rot or break apart. They simply float, forming massive natural pontoon bridges and temporary drifting islands across the submerged world. They are completely waterlogged, their diamond-shaped scales slick and glistening with the endless heavy condensation of the fog. It is here, upon these floating fortresses of ancient wood, that we find the true masters of the Carboniferous wetlands. As our perspective drifts closer to one of the largest, most stable logs, the mist parts just enough to reveal a gathering of extraordinary creatures. These are massive, primitive amphibians resting on giant floating logs in the black water. In our modern world, amphibians are often small, delicate creatures. Frogs that fit in the palm of your hand or slender salamanders hiding beneath garden stones. But in this hyperoxygenated, predator-free paradise, the amphibians have grown to the size of modern crocodiles and alligators. They are the apex, the undisputed lords of the swamp, and they rule their domain not with frantic aggression, but with a profound, terrifyingly beautiful patience. Observe the sheer cinematic scale of these creatures. They stretch out to lengths of 8, 10, even 15 feet. Their bodies are wide, flat, and built incredibly low to the ground, designed perfectly to distribute their massive weight across the slippery, floating logs and the soft mud of the shallows. They possess heavy, sprawling limbs that extend outward from their sides, anchoring them with an unshakable stability to the ancient wood beneath them. The hyper-realistic detail of their physiology is mesmerizing. They do not have the dry, armored scales of the reptiles that will eventually succeed them millions of years in the future. Instead, their skin is smooth, incredibly thick, and perpetually damp. It is a highly permeable membrane designed to absorb the rich 35% oxygen directly from the heavy, humid air and the dark water around them. Because the atmosphere does the work of breathing for them, they do not need to pant or heave their chests. They exist in a state of extreme metabolic efficiency. As you watch them, the first thing you notice is their absolute unwavering immobility. They are perfectly still, their dark skin blending into the shadows, eyes heavy and half closed. This is not the tense, coiled stillness of a predator waiting to strike. This is the deep, restorative stillness of a creature that has absolutely nothing to fear. There are no massive theropod dinosaurs waiting to hunt them. There are no sudden freezing winters to force them into desperate hibernation. The swamp provides everything they could ever need in an endless, effortless bounty. Therefore, their default state of existence is rest. Their coloration is a masterpiece of natural camouflage, perfectly suited to the dark, moody lighting of this world. They are painted in deep, mottled shades of olive, charcoal, and dark, bruising purples. When they lie flat against the dark, tannin-stained wood of the floating logs, they become almost entirely invisible, melting seamlessly into the heavy shadows cast by the thick fog. The only indication that they are alive at all is the incredibly slow, shallow rise and fall of their broad throats and the faint, wet gleam of their heavy, half-closed eyes. Look closely at those eyes. They are ancient, cold, and beautifully alien. They are positioned high on the tops of their flat skulls, allowing them to remain almost entirely submerged in the black water while still keeping a lazy, indifferent watch over the foggy horizon. Right now, as they rest on the logs, their thick, fleshy eyelids are drooping heavily. They look profoundly sleepy, infected by the same heavy, lethargic energy that permeates every inch of this hyperoxygenated world. Watching them, you cannot help but feel a sympathetic wave of exhaustion wash over your own body. If these massive, powerful titans of the swamp can surrender so completely to rest, then surely you can too. For a long time there is only the visual silence of the mist and the dark water. The atmosphere is thick, pressing against the skin like a warm, damp, and incredibly comforting blanket. And then, the auditory landscape of the Carboniferous begins to reveal its most magnificent, deeply soothing secret. It starts not with a sound, but with a vibration. Deep within the broad, flat throat of the largest amphibian resting on the log, a massive vocal sac begins to slowly inflate. It swells, filling with the dense, heavy air of the swamp, expanding like a dark, textured balloon. The creature does not open its mouth. It does not bare its teeth or make a sudden, aggressive movement. It simply tightens the ancient muscles of its throat, forcing the trapped air across a set of thick, primitive vocal cords. The resulting sound defies description. It is a series of deep, booming, cello-like croaks echoing through the fog. Imagine the lowest, most resonant string on a massive, perfectly tuned cello being slowly, deliberately bowed by a master musician. The sound is incredibly rich, vibrating with a heavy sub-bass frequency that you do not just hear with your ears, but feel deep within the marrow of your bones. It is a long, drawn-out, and profoundly mournful note that rolls across the surface of the pitch-black water, slow and heavy with the weight of deep time. Whom are you on? The sound wave travels outward, but it does not behave the way sound behaves in the modern, thin atmosphere. The sheer density of the hyperoxygenated air and the physical liquid barrier of the mist fundamentally alter the acoustics of the swamp. The fog acts as an acoustic dampener, making the sounds feel distant, warm, and comforting. It strips away all the sharp, high-frequency edges of the croak. There is no harshness to it, no alarming suddenness. The mist catches the sound, softens it, rounds it out, and wraps it in a heavy, sonic velvet before delivering it to your ears. Even though the massive creature is resting on a log just a few dozen yards away, the dampening effect of the fog makes the croak sound as though it is originating from miles away, echoing across an endless, unseen distance. This acoustic illusion is the ultimate trigger for a restless mind. It creates a vast protective buffer zone between you and the source of the sound. You are completely insulated. You are observing a powerful, majestic creature, but the fog ensures that it remains entirely distant, non-threatening, and profoundly safe. The first deep croak slowly fades away, swallowed by the heavy, damp air. A moment of perfect, absolute silence returns to the swamp. You can hear the faint, delicate hiss of condensation dripping from a nearby fern frond into the dark water. You can hear the slow, rhythmic bubbling of the marsh gas rising from the deep peat bogs. The tension releases. Then, from the far side of the floating log, a second amphibian answers. This croak is slightly different in pitch, a little lower, a little longer. Wooer. Moo. It is a slow, resonant acknowledgement, a peaceful communication between two ancient minds resting in the dark. Suddenly, from across the black water hidden entirely by the thick, rolling walls of the white mist, another voice joins in, and then another, and another. You have entered the grand cathedral of the amphibian choirs. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of these massive creatures, resting on unseen logs and muddy shallows stretching out for miles into the fog, begin to sing. It is not a chaotic, overlapping cacophony of noise. Because their metabolisms are so incredibly slow and the air they breathe is so heavy, their calls are spaced out with vast, patient intervals of silence. It is a slow, hypnotic, and perfectly synchronized symphony of the deep. Listen to the overlapping layers of sound. A deep, booming note originates from the left, rolling through the warm fog. Just as it begins to fade, a slightly higher, cello-like groan answers from the right. A massive, vibrating sub-bass hum resonates from the unseen depths, straight ahead. The air itself seems to be vibrating, humming with the collective peaceful energy of the giant amphibians. This is pure, prehistoric ASMR. The combination of the heavy, muffled acoustics and the low-frequency, booming croaks creates an auditory environment that is scientifically designed to slow your brainwaves. In the modern world, our minds are trained to react to high-pitched, sudden noises, alarms, sirens, ringing phones. These sounds trigger our fight-or-flight response, spiking our adrenaline and keeping us awake. But the sounds of the Carboniferous choir are the exact opposite. They are low, steady, predictable, and incredibly slow. They trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, telling your body that the environment is stable, that there are no threats, and that it is finally safe to shut down. Allow the deep, booming, cello-like croaks to become your anchor. Focus your entirely attention on the spaces between the sounds. Notice how the fog acts as an acoustic dampener, making the sounds feel distant, warm, and comforting. Let that warmth wrap around your shoulders like a heavy, weighted blanket. As you float here in the misty, hyper-oxygenated dark, watch the massive amphibians resting on their giant, floating logs in the black water. Notice how they are perfectly still, their dark skin blending into the shadows, eyes heavy and half-closed. They are the masters of this world, and they have mastered the art of doing absolutely nothing. They do not worry about the future. They do not regret the past. They simply exist in the heavy, humid present, breathing in the rich air and singing their slow, resonant songs into the dark. You are invited to join them in this profound stillness. You do not need to move. You do not need to think. Let your breathing synchronize with the slow, rhythmic swelling of their vocal sacs. Inhale deeply, pulling the imaginary, oxygen-rich air of the ancient swamp into your lungs. Feel it oxygenate your blood, soothing your tired muscles and clearing your cluttered mind. Exhale slowly, releasing every ounce of tension you are holding in your jaw, your neck, and your shoulders. The choir will sing for you all night. The massive, primitive amphibians resting on giant floating logs in the black water will not leave their posts. They will remain perfectly still, their dark skin blending into the shadows, eyes heavy and half closed, guarding your sleep. The deep, booming, cello-like croaks echoing through the fog will be your lullaby. Let the fog act as an acoustic dampener, making the sounds feel distant, warm, and comforting until they fade into the soft, unyielding borders of your own dreams. You are safe in the deep swamp. You are sheltered by the mist. Sink deeply into the heavy, ancient water of your imagination, and let the gentle, booming choir carry you down into a profound, unbroken, and beautiful slumber. We have drifted through the sprawling, shadowed understory, moving past the silent, heavy forms of the gentle giants that walk this ancient earth. And now, the grand, sweeping view of the primeval swamp begins to narrow. We explore the quiet, eternal mechanics of this era, the era that created the cold we use today. As we transition deeper into the heart of the endless forest, the visuals become darker and more static. We are pulling our focus away from the massive, sprawling vistas of the flooded wetlands, away from the looming shadows of the titans, and shrinking our perspective down. We are entering a realm of extreme macro photography. In this microscopic world, time does not merely slow down, it seems to solidify entirely, caught in the heavy, warm embrace of the deep woods. Imagine floating just inches away from the massive, towering trunk of a colossal scale tree. These giants do not have the rough, dry, brown bark of the trees you know in the waking world. Instead, the surface before you is covered in beautiful, diamond-shaped green scales that look like reptile skin. Each individual scale is perfectly formed, overlapping with its neighbor in a flawless geometric pattern that stretches up for 100 feet into the impenetrable fog. The surface is slick with the eternal dampness of the swamp. You can see the gentle, continuous hiss of moisture condensing on millions of scales and dripping heavily into the water below. But our attention is drawn to a single, specific point on this massive, living pillar. Near the center of your vision, a small, natural fissure has opened between two of the heavy green scales. From this tiny wound in the ancient wood, the lifeblood of the forest is slowly, silently escaping. It is thick, golden resin oozing agonizingly slowly down the scaly trunk of a giant tree. In the gloom of the deep swamp, where the heavy canopy blocks almost all the light from the sun, this single bead of sap is a beacon of profound, mesmerizing beauty. It catches the dim light, glowing like a warm ember in the dark green forest. It is not a harsh, blinding light, but a soft, internal radiance. The golden hue is rich and complex, trapping the faint, scattered photons of the misty environment and reflecting them back with a deep, honey-colored warmth. It looks like a tiny, liquid sun suspended against the dark, wet emerald of the tree trunk. Let your eyes rest completely on this glowing, golden ember. Everything else in the world, the giant insects, the endless water, the shifting fogs, fades into a soft, out-of-focus blur. The entire universe has been reduced to this single, perfect droplet of ancient resin. Watch the impossible slowness of its descent. It is fighting a beautiful, silent war against gravity. The viscosity of the resin is so incredibly high that it barely registers as a liquid. It moves with a heavy, deliberate reluctance, creeping down the textured surface of the reptilian scales at a pace that cannot be tracked by the restless, waking mind. You must surrender your own internal clock to witness its progress. It bulges slightly at the bottom, gathering microscopic amounts of mass as it creeps over the ridge of a green scale, stretching itself to the absolute limit of its surface tension. As you watch this agonizingly slow progression, allow the pacing of your own thoughts to match it. The modern world demands instant reactions, rapid processing, and endless speed. But here in the heart of the Carboniferous mist, speed does not exist. There is only the slow, eternal weeping of the trees. Let your heart rate synchronize with the millimeter by millimeter descent of the golden sap. Let the tension in your shoulders melt and slide away, just as the heavy resin slides down the ancient wood. As the visual of this glowing droplet captures your mind, the auditory landscape zeroes in on the microscopic physics of the event. The heavy, muffled acoustics of the incredibly humid, thick atmosphere act as a perfect, natural, soundproof room, isolating this tiny interaction from the rest of the world. Listen closely to the sticky, incredibly slow and satisfying stretching sound of the thick resin moving. It is an acoustic texture that borders on the physical, a deep, resonant micro-vibration that you can almost feel tingling at the base of your neck. As the massive droplet inches downward, pulling away from the scale above it, the highly adhesive polymers within the sap resist the separation. They stretch into microscopic golden threads, pulling tighter and tighter until they finally, silently snap, reabsorbing into the main body of the droplet. This creates a continuous, heavily muted creak and pull, a wet, viscous stretching noise that is the ultimate embodiment of pure, tactile ASMR. It is the sound of absolute resistance to change, the sound of a heavy, sleepy liquid refusing to let go of the wood. It is accompanied by the softest, most delicate squelch, as the leading edge of the droplet rolls over the damp, mossy edge of the next scale. This intimate, sticky soundscape is perfectly paired with the continuous, soft dripping of the forest. In the deep background, entirely out of focus, the millions of other trees in the swamp are weeping their condensed moisture into the black water. Plop, drip, shh. It is a random, spatial symphony of water meeting water, creating a soft, rhythmic bed of white noise. But right here in the immediate foreground, the thick, heavy stretching of the golden resin dominates your hearing. The contrast between the thin, fast drops of water in the distance and the thick, slow, agonizing stretch of the amber sap right beside your ear creates a profound sense of acoustic depth and absolute security. You are anchored to this specific tree, wrapped in a cocoon of warm, sticky sound. This golden resin is not merely sap. It is a perfectly clear, liquid time capsule. As it creeps down the trunk, its incredibly sticky surface acts as an inescapable trap for the microscopic elements of the Carboniferous world. A single microscopic spore from a giant fern drifts lazily through the heavy, hyperoxygenated air and brushes against the glowing ember. Instantly, it is caught. Slowly, over the course of hours and days, the heavy golden liquid rolls over the spore, swallowing it entirely, suspending it perfectly within its honey-colored heart. Millions of years from now, long after the oceans have shifted and the continents have torn themselves apart, human hands will pull this exact piece of hardened amber from the earth. They will look inside and see the spore, preserved with flawless, terrifying perfection, completely untouched by the ravages of time. The resin is nature's ultimate mechanism for pausing the universe. It defies decay. It defies the relentless forward march of entropy. To look at the oozing resin is to look at immortality. The world outside this swamp may eventually burn, freeze, and die, but the golden droplet will remain exactly as it is, a warm, glowing memory of the world before wood. Knowing this brings an incredible heavy sense of peace. You do not need to worry about the passage of time here because time has been caught and trapped in the amber. The anxieties of tomorrow, the regrets of yesterday, they cannot penetrate the thick, protective shell of the resin. You are suspended in a perfect golden stasis. The air around the droplet is thick and warm. The heavy, hyperoxygenated atmosphere presses in, carrying the clean, sharp, and slightly sweet scent of the raw sap. It smells of ancient earth, crushed green needles, and deep, unbroken stillness. With every breath you take, draw that heavy, prehistoric air deep into your lungs. Feel it oxygenating your blood, slowing your pulse, and wrapping your nervous system in a warm, heavy blanket. Exhale slowly, imagining your own breath moving the tiny, microscopic threads of the stretching sap. The glowing ember of resin continues its journey. It has moved perhaps a quarter of an inch in the last hour. The sticky, satisfying sound of its descent is a continuous hypnotic loop. Stretch, pull, settle. It is a lullaby whispered by the ancient earth, a reminder that there is no rush, no urgency, and nowhere else to be. Let the visual of the dim light catching the amber burn softly behind your closed eyelids. Let the glowing warmth of it spread down through your chest, into your heavy limbs, sinking you deeper and deeper into the mattress of your own imagination. The Carboniferous forest is watching over you. The gentle giants are sleeping in the mist. The coal of the future is quietly compressing in the dark below, and the golden tears of the ancient trees are slowly, beautifully sealing the world away. Surrender to the profound slowness of the amber. Let the sticky, stretching sounds pull you down into the deepest layers of rest. You are perfectly preserved in this moment, safe in the warm, timeless dark, drifting peacefully in the heart of the eternal fog. As we drift further from the dense, oxygen-rich canopy and descend toward the lower, heavier layers of the Carboniferous forest, we enter a phase of profound, unbroken stasis. We are transitioning deeply into the endless accumulation of the dream state, a realm where the frantic, momentary anxieties of the modern waking world are entirely swallowed by the quiet, eternal mechanics of this ancient era. Down here, near the surface of the pitch-black swamp, the environment undergoes a subtle but powerful shift. The vibrant emerald greens of the upper fronds begin to fade, and the visuals become significantly darker and more static. There is no wind to stir the mist. There are no sudden movements to capture your attention. The landscape settles into a state of heavy, absolute stillness, acting as a massive natural sensory deprivation chamber. To fully surrender to this environment, we must focus our attention on the life cycle of the colossal flora that define this world. Surrounding us in the thick, glowing white fog are the towering trunks of the scale trees, giants that reach hundreds of feet into the heavy sky. These are not the trees of our modern era, with their deep, anchoring taproots and solid wooden cores. These prehistoric monoliths are architectural marvels of their time, supported by a surprisingly fragile, sprawling network of shallow roots that spread out like an intricate, woven mat across the treacherous, waterlogged peat of the swamp floor. They have stood in this exact spot, perfectly motionless for centuries, absorbing the hyperoxygenated air and pulling carbon from the heavy, humid atmosphere. But in a world completely dominated by water, nothing can stand forever. The earth beneath these giants is not solid rock or packed soil. It is a soft, shifting, and deeply saturated sponge of organic material. Over the course of countless decades, the foundation beneath one of the most ancient and massive of these scale trees has begun to slowly, imperceptibly yield. This is not a sudden, violent event. There is no chaotic storm or hurricane-force wind to tear the tree from the earth. Instead, it is a process of agonizingly slow, peaceful surrender. Imagine focusing on the base of this singular, massive, ancient tree. The structural integrity of its root system is failing, millimeter by millimeter, as the soft, dark mud gently gives way under the colossal weight of the trunk. You can almost feel the exact moment the equilibrium shifts. The tree, which has stood as a silent, unwavering sentinel for hundreds of years, slowly loses its grip on the earth. As the giant begins its descent, it does so with a majestic, hypnotic slowness that defies the modern laws of gravity. The thick, humid air of the Carboniferous period acts almost like a liquid, providing a heavy physical resistance that cushions the tree's fall. The descent is a beautifully rendered, hyper-realistic slow-motion sequence. You watch as the massive, scaly trunk arcs through the glowing white mist. The diamond-shaped green scales that cover its bark catch the faint, ambient light, creating a shimmering, textured visual that slowly pans across your field of vision. The sheer scale of the movement is awe-inspiring, yet completely devoid of fear or tension. It is the natural, inevitable, and peaceful conclusion to a centuries-long vigil. The massive ancient tree slowly loses its grip and falls into the deep black swamp water. In a modern forest, the fall of a giant tree is a chaotic, deafening event of violent crashing of snapping branches, shattering timber, and trembling earth. But here, in the acoustic isolation of the primeval fog, the sound profile is completely different. The heavy, saturated atmosphere acts as a massive, natural audio compressor, smoothly rolling off all the high-frequency snaps and cracks, leaving only the deepest, most resonant bass frequencies. When the colossal trunk finally meets the surface of the dark water, it does not produce a sharp, jarring crash. Instead, the impact creates a heavy, muffled, and deeply resonant splash. It is a sound of pure, low-end acoustic perfection, a sub-bass frequency that vibrates softly through the mist and resonates directly within the center of your chest. The sound is incredibly dense and heavy, mirroring the physical weight of the tree itself. This profound, muffled impact is immediately followed by a secondary, even more relaxing acoustic texture. The slow, soothing rush of water rushing in to fill the empty space left behind by the falling giant. Listen to that liquid sound. It is a thick, fluid, and encompassing white noise like the slow pouring of heavy cream. The dark water of the swamp, displaced for a fraction of a second by the massive trunk, folds back in upon itself, surging over the scaly bark and completely enveloping the fallen tree in a cool, dark embrace. The acoustic waves ripple outward to the pitch-black water, growing softer and softer until they eventually fade back into the complete, absolute silence of the midnight fog. Now, the giant has fallen. It lies completely submerged beneath the surface of the dark, still water. In our modern understanding of the natural world, a fallen tree immediately becomes a banquet for the forest. Microscopic life forms, fungi, and bacteria immediately begin the process of decomposition, breaking down the complex wooden structures, rotting the timber away, and returning its nutrients to the soil. But this is the Carboniferous period, a time of profound and beautiful biological anomaly. The towering scaled trees of this era are constructed from a revolutionary new biological compound called lignin. It is the molecular glue that gives them their incredible strength and allows them to reach such towering heights. However, evolution is a slow, methodical process, and the microscopic life of the earth has not yet caught up to this architectural innovation. As the massive tree settles onto the soft, muddy floor of the swamp, it remains in a state of absolute flawless preservation. Because there are no microbes yet evolved to eat the wood, it doesn't rot. There are no organisms in this ancient, hyper-oxygenated world capable of breaking down the tough, complex lignin molecules. The tree is immune to decay. It is immune to the ravages of time. It has simply been removed from the bright, humid world above and placed safely into a dark, cold, and perfect state of suspended animation. Watch as the heavy, dark water settles completely. The concentric ripples created by the heavy, muffled, and deeply resonant splash slowly expand and dissipate, leaving the surface of the swamp looking like a flawless obsidian mirror once again. Beneath that mirror, the giant tree simply sinks into the perfect, preserving dark. It sinks down to the tannin-stained water, coming to rest on a thick, soft mattress of thousands of other fallen trees that have accumulated over millennia. This is the era that created the coal we use today, a time of endless, patient gathering. Century after century, millennium after millennium, the unrotting organic matter piles up on the floor of the global swamp. It is a slow, silent burial, a process of deep geological time where the carbon pulled from the ancient atmosphere is safely locked away in the dark. The tree will lie there in the perfect, preserving dark for 300 million years. It will not decompose. It will not fade away. It will be slowly, gently pressed by the unimaginable weight of the sediment above it. its cellular structure slowly transitioning from scaly green wood to rich, black, energy-dense coal. Imagine the profound peace of that specific preservation. The tree has completed its long upward struggle toward the light. It has absorbed the sun, it has breathed the heavy fog, and now its work is entirely done. It has surrendered its grip, accepted the heavy, muffled impact of the water, and sunk into a place where time, weather, and decay can no longer touch it. It is completely insulated from the passing of ages. This is the ultimate metaphor for the sleep you are seeking tonight. Like the ancient scaly giant, you too have spent your days standing upright, absorbing the chaotic energy, the demands, and the bright, jarring lights of the waking world. You have held your ground, anchoring yourself against the shifting currents of your daily life. But now the environment has changed. The light has faded. The fog has rolled in. It is time to slowly, peacefully lose your grip on the waking hours. You do not need to fight the descent. Allow yourself to yield, just as the soft peat yielded to the roots of the ancient tree. Let go of the tension in your muscles, the rigid posture of your spine, and the relentless upward striving of your waking mind. Allow your consciousness to slowly tilt, leaning heavily into the soft, supporting atmosphere of the night. As you feel yourself falling toward sleep, do not anticipate a jarring crash. Your descent is cushioned by the heavy, thick air of your own quiet room. When your mind finally crosses the threshold between wakefulness and slumber, let the transition be marked only by a heavy, muffled, and deeply resonant splash within your own imagination. Feel the slow, soothing rush of water, the dark, comforting waves of deep REM sleep rushing in to fill the empty space left behind by your conscious thoughts. Let the dark water close over you. In this deep, submerged state, the anxieties, the stresses, and the microscopic irritations of the day cannot reach you. They cannot break you down. Because there are no microbes yet evolved to eat the wood, the tree doesn't rot. And in this perfect, preserving dark, your mind will not be consumed by worry. You are held safely in a state of absolute untouched stasis. The visuals of the world above the glowing mist, the towering scale trees, the giant, slow-moving insects, all of them begin to seamlessly cross-dissolve into the pitch black of the underwater abyss. The light is entirely filtered out by the deep, tannin-stained water. The acoustics of the environment shift, applying a heavy, natural low-pass filter to the universe. The bubbling of the swamp gas above becomes distant and muted. The only thing that remains is the profound, heavy pressure of the deep, wrapping around you like a weighted blanket, anchoring you securely to the soft, ancient floor of the world. There is nothing left to do but rest. The era of the Carboniferous giants is a testament to the beauty of slow, inevitable surrender. The trees fall, the water rushes in, and the earth simply keeps their memory perfectly intact for millions of years. Sink deeply now into the absolute quiet. Let the slow, soothing rush of the dark water carry you away, down into the timeless, unrotting, and perfectly preserving depths of an unbroken slumber. We have witnessed the slow, inevitable surrender of the towering giants. We have watched the colossal, scaly trunks of the ancient trees lose their grip on the flooded soil and crash into the deep, black waters of the global swamp. Now, we must follow them. We pull our gaze away from the hazy, fog-choked sky. We turn our attention away from the dripping canopy, away from the glowing white mists that roll over the surface of the world, and we look down. We look down into the perfectly still, pitch-black water. It is time to leave the atmosphere behind and descend into the heavy, silent foundation of the Carboniferous earth. As we breach the surface and slip beneath the dark water, the transition is absolute and immediate. The world above is instantly severed. The deep, booming, cello-like croaks of the massive amphibians that echoed through the fog are gone. The soft, rhythmic rustling of the giant millipedes navigating the fallen fronds has vanished. The low-frequency, helicopter-like thrumming of the colossal dragonflies has been completely erased. There is a complete cessation of animal noises. Down here in the submerged depths of the swamp, the biological kingdom of movement and hunger does not exist. The frantic need to hunt, to feed, to breathe air, all of it is left behind on the surface. You have entered a realm where biology has surrendered completely to the slow, unyielding forces of geology. The visual environment undergoes a profound transformation. Looking down into the dark water, we are entering a space of absolute sensory deprivation. The water here is not clear, nor is it the vibrant blue of a coral reef. It is stained a deep, profound tea color, an impenetrable amber created by the tannins leaking from millions of tons of submerged, unrotting vegetation. As we sink deeper, moving away from the faint, diffused light of the surface, this dark amber quickly thickens into an absolute, flawless black. The light of the hazy sun cannot penetrate these heavy, suspended depths. There are no shadows here, because there is no light to cast them. As your eyes adjust to the complete absence of illumination, you realize that the bottom of this swamp is unlike any ocean floor or lake bed in the modern world. There is no sand. There is no bare rock. The accumulated plant matter of thousands of years sits perfectly preserved at the bottom. Because the microscopic bacteria and fungi of this ancient era have not yet evolved the ability to break down lignin, the miraculous, tough polymer that gives the giant scale trees their incredible height. The fallen wood simply does not rot. It is a submerged graveyard of unimaginable scale. Billions of tons of roots, massive scaly trunks, giant diamond-patterned fronds, and golden amber resin lie tangled together in the silent dark. This is not a layer of debris. It is a geological formation in its infancy. For thousands upon thousands of years, the forest above has been raining its dead down into the water, and every single leaf, every single branch remains entirely intact. The visual focus narrows to the sheer, incomprehensible mass of this accumulation. You are witnessing the slow, majestic process of deep time. The weight of the water above is immense, but the weight of the endless accumulation of plant matter is even greater. Layer upon heavy layer. The newest fallen trees rest gently on the top, but beneath them the older layers are being slowly, inexorably crushed. They are slowly compressing into a soft, dark mattress of organic earth. This is the birth of the great peat bogs. Across the entire supercontinent, in wetlands spanning millions of square miles, this exact process is happening in perfect, unbroken silence. The carbon that these massive trees pulled from the hyperoxygenated atmosphere is being locked away, buried beneath the mud and the water, effectively removed from the sky. It is an endless planetary-scale sequestration, a heavy, quiet accumulation that will eventually, over hundreds of millions of years, form the massive seams of coal that will power future human civilizations. But right now there is no fire, there is no industry, there is only the slow, cold, unyielding pressure of the deep earth. As the visual slate is wiped perfectly clean by the absolute blackness of the submerged bog, the auditory landscape steps forward to wrap around your consciousness. Because there are no animal noises, the audio shifts strictly to the heavy liquid sounds of the water and the earth compressing. This is not a sound you hear with the delicate structures of your inner ear. It is a sound that vibrates through the density of the water and resonates directly within your bones. Imagine the sound of billions of tons of saturated wood and fibrous plant matter groaning under an immense planetary gravity. It is not a sharp, violent cracking sound. It is a deeply muffled, incredibly low-frequency resonance. Listen to the slow, wet creak of ancient timber yielding to the crushing pressure above. It is a sound of pure physical submission. The giant trees, which once stood 100 feet tall and drank the humid air, are now bowing their heads, allowing their massive forms to be flattened, condensed, and woven into the fabric of the earth itself. Accompanying this deep structural groaning is the heavy fluid sigh of trapped water. As the layers of organic matter are crushed together, the water caught within the porous wood and the spaces between the tangled branches is forcefully squeezed out. It produces a sluggish, thick, bubbling sound, not the gaseous, hollow bloop of the swamp surface, but a dense liquid shifting. It is the sound of heavy fluids moving through microscopic spaces under extreme pressure. It creates a continuous, heavily muted sub-bass rumble, a warm tectonic purr that acts as the ultimate acoustic anchor for a restless mind. This environment, this dark, heavy, compressing peat bog, is the perfect sanctuary for deep, unbroken rest. In the waking world, your mind is like the frantic surface of the swamp. It is constantly processing stimuli, reacting to noises, navigating complex environments, and supporting the chaotic weight of daily anxieties. But down here, none of that can survive. Allow yourself to sink into this metaphor. Imagine your consciousness descending into the dark, tannin-stained water. As you drift downward, let the sharp, buzzing thoughts of your day detach from your mind, just like the dead leaves falling from the giant ferns above. Watch as those anxieties sink into the pitch-black depths. They are heavy, and they are pulled inexorably down into the tangled, ancient roots. Now let the immense, comforting pressure of the deep water settle over you. Feel the incredible weight of the environment pressing in from all sides. It is not a crushing, painful pressure. It is a deep, warm, and profoundly secure embrace. It is the feeling of being held perfectly still by the gravity of the earth. Just as the unrotting wood surrenders its form to become the soft, dark mattress of organic earth, you must surrender your tension. You do not need to hold yourself together anymore. You do not need to support the weight of the sky. Let your muscles untighten. Let your jaw unclench. Allow the heavy liquid sounds of the water and the earth compressing to wash over you, acting as a slow, rhythmic lullaby. The compression is incredibly slow. It moves at the speed of geology, a pace so magnificently drawn out that it renders human time completely insignificant. There is no rush down here. There are no deadlines. There's no morning to wake up for. The peat bog will remain in this state of absolute, dark stasis for millions of years. Listen to the heavy, muffled shifting of the submerged earth. Every wet creak, every deep, liquid sigh is a reminder that the world is functioning perfectly without your intervention. The carbon is being buried. The earth is settling. The swamp is managing itself in the dark. As you lie here, suspended in the deep, unrotting layers of the ancient world, allow your breathing to match the sluggish, heavy rhythm of the compression. Inhale the slow, deep resonance of the deep water. Exhale all remaining resistance. Let the total sensory deprivation of the pitch-black water shield your eyes, and let the pure, heavy liquid acoustics shield your mind. You are safely buried in the foundation of time, wrapped in the soft, dark mattress of the ancient earth, sinking deeper and deeper into a profound, unbroken, and timeless slumber. We have spent our journey exploring the incredible, oxygen-rich depths of the ancient swamp, moving through the dense white mist and observing the slow, majestic lives of the giant arthropods and amphibians that rule this world. We have witnessed the amber tears of the scale trees and the silent, unrotting graves of the fallen giants beneath the black water. But now the grand cycle of the prehistoric day is finally coming to a close. As the Earth continues its ancient, unhurried rotation, pulling this hemisphere away from the warmth of the sun, we must shift our perspective upward. Leaving the flooded floor and the sprawling roots behind, our vision slowly ascends through the heavy, hyperoxygenated fog. We are rising toward the highest limits of this alien forest, drifting up the massive, scaly trunks of the towering lepidodendron trees. As we reach the upper limits of the forest, the camera looks up as the sun sets. In the modern world, a sunset is a display of crisp oranges, pinks, and purples bleeding across a clear sky. But here, in the Carboniferous period, the sunset is an entirely different, incredibly subdued optical phenomenon. The atmosphere is so thick with moisture and so heavily saturated with elevated levels of oxygen that the sun does not pierce the sky as a sharp, blinding orb. Instead, it appears as a massive, diffused, glowing ember, a muted, bruised red disk sinking slowly into the dense global haze. The light it casts is weak, stripped of its harsh, high-frequency energy by the time it reaches the upper canopy. This dying light attempts to filter down through the sprawling, chaotic architecture of the ancient trees, but it faces an insurmountable barrier. High above the swamp floor, the thick, scaly branches of the giant ferns interlock, completely blocking out the remaining twilight. To truly understand the absolute darkness that is about to fall, we must examine the structure of this incredible canopy. These are not the delicate, whispering leaves of a modern deciduous forest. The branches of these scale trees are massive, heavy, and covered in the same diamond-shaped, reptilian-like scales that armor their trunks. At the very top of the canopy, these branches do not merely touch, they weave together into a dense, almost impenetrable biological ceiling. As the colossal trees compete for the fading light, their fronds overlap, layer upon heavy layer, creating a continuous, sprawling roof that stretches for thousands of miles across the prehistoric continent. As the bruised red sun dips below the unseen horizon, the final desperate rays of twilight strike the top of this scaly roof. For a brief, fleeting moment, the upper canopy glows with a faint, ghostly illumination. But beneath the branches, down where we are suspended in the thick mist, that light simply does not exist. The interlocking structure is too perfect, too dense. As the sun vanishes completely, the great biological shield of the ferns shuts out the sky entirely. The forest is plunged into absolute black. This is not the darkness of a modern night, where the moon and the stars cast a faint, silvery glow over the landscape. Because the canopy is so incredibly dense, the cosmos is entirely hidden from view. There is no moonlight to reflect off the black water. There is no starlight to guide the eye. It is an absolute, flawless, and profound pitch blackness. It is a visual void so complete that it feels like a physical weight pressing against the optic nerve. Without any photons of light reaching the eye, the brain stops attempting to process visual information. The towering trunks, the floating logs, the giant, sleeping amphibians, all of it is erased from your vision, swallowed entirely by the deep, warm, and eternal night of the swamp. As the visual world is stripped away, the other senses are dramatically heightened, rushing in to fill the void. The heavy, oxygen-rich air cools slightly with the departure of the sun, causing the immense volume of suspended humidity to undergo a rapid phase change. The fog thickens even further in the dark, and moisture begins to condense rapidly on every available surface. High above in the unseen canopy, millions of tiny water droplets form on the waxy, diamond-shaped scales of the interlocking branches. These droplets gather, growing heavier and heavier until the surface tension can no longer hold them against the scales. They fall. In the sudden absolute visual emptiness of the forest, the auditory landscape takes on a profound new significance. The narrative voice softly fades out. The human element of this journey, the scientific observations, and the historical context are no longer necessary. The history of the world has been told, the biology has been explained, and the intellect can now finally rest. As the words become fewer and further between, the voice of the ancient earth itself steps forward to take its place. Listen into the dark. The ambient sound of the dripping water grows slightly louder and more rhythmic, because the high-frequency sounds of the day have ceased and the giant insects have settled into their resting state, the acoustics of the swamp are dominated entirely by this falling water. It is not the chaotic, rushing sound of a thunderstorm, nor is it the harsh, scattered noise of rain hitting pavement. It is a slow, deeply resonant, and incredibly tactile symphony of single drops hitting the dark, peat-filled water below. Plop, drip, splash. Every drop of condensation falling from the unseen canopy strikes the black mirror of the swamp with a distinct, crystalline clarity. Because the air is so dense, these sounds do not echo sharply. They are muffled, rounded, and softened, echoing with a warm, low-frequency resonance. It is a deeply hypnotic rhythm, a natural liquid metronome that varies just enough to keep the mind engaged, yet remains so steady and predictable that it lulls the nervous system into a state of profound, unshakable calm. The sound of the dripping water wraps around you like a heavy acoustic blanket. It tells you that the world is functioning perfectly without your intervention. The trees are condensing the moisture. The water is returning to the deep. The ancient earth is executing its slow, perfect, and unbroken cycles in the absolute dark. You do not need to see the canopy to know that it is protecting you. You do not need to see the water to know that it is there. You are suspended in the perfect, isolated void of the Carboniferous night. As the last remnants of the narrative fade into the shadows, allow your own internal monologue to fade with them. Let the dark, heavy air fill your lungs, slowing your heart rate to match the steady, rhythmic dripping of the ancient forest. The world of light and motion is gone, replaced entirely by the soothing, infinite black and the eternal, heavy hiss of the water. Surrender to the absolute dark, and let the gentle, rhythmic acoustics of the prehistoric swamp carry you down into the deepest, most peaceful, and uninterrupted slumber. The light of the ancient world has been entirely extinguished, completely swallowed by the massive interlocking architecture of the primeval forest. The towering, scaly branches of the giant ferns have sealed shut miles above our heads, locking us within the deepest, most secure sanctuary our planet has ever known. As we sink into this phase of the prehistoric night, the visual world that we rely so heavily upon in our daily waking lives is gently, firmly stripped away. You are now staring into a pitch-black screen. This is not a sudden, frightening darkness. It is a slow, enveloping, and profoundly welcoming void. In the modern era, true darkness is incredibly rare. Our nights are constantly pierced by the artificial glare of streetlights, the blue glow of screens, and the frantic, pulsing energy of civilization. Our eyes are forced to remain active, constantly searching for shapes, processing jagged lines, and attempting to pull meaning out of the shadows. But here, in the flooded, unrotting heart of the Carboniferous period, there is absolutely nothing left for your optic nerves to process. The darkness is absolute, flawless, and mathematically perfect. It is a heavy velvet curtain that has been drawn across the theater of the world, signaling to your brain that the time for observation is completely over. As your eyes surrender to this perfect sensory deprivation, your mind may still search for a visual anchor, and the ancient swamp provides one, but it is barely there. Only the faintest, ghostly wisps of gray fog are visible drifting across the lens. Imagine these wisps not as clouds, but as the slow, rhythmic breath of the swamp itself. Because the air is so saturated with moisture and hyperoxygenated, the fog takes on a thick, almost gelatinous quality. In the pitch blackness, these ghostly wisps do not reflect light, because there is no light to reflect. Instead, they seem to manifest as subtle shifts in the density of the darkness. They are slow-moving gradients of charcoal and midnight gray, drifting across the absolute black canvas with an agonizing, hypnotic slowness. They slide across your field of vision like slow-motion phantoms, possessing no hard edges, no defined borders, and no sudden movements. Watching them is like watching a memory slowly dissolve. They appear, They stretch into long, lazy ribbons of vapor, and then they melt seamlessly back into the void. This minimalist visual loop is the ultimate trigger for a restless mind. It gives your eyes just enough of a gentle, shifting texture to keep them from searching for complex shapes, lulling your visual cortex into a state of deep, unwavering paralysis. With the visual world reduced to these faint, ghostly wisps of gray fog, your auditory senses expand to fill the void. But the sounds of the Carboniferous night are entirely different from the noises of the day. The rhythmic bubbling of the marsh gas has subsided. The deep, cello-like croaks of the massive amphibians have faded into silence. The giant, iron-clad millipedes have curled tightly beneath the fallen logs, their clicking footsteps completely halted. The creatures of this hyperoxygenated world are locked in a profound, motionless slumber. What remains is not the sound of life, but the sound of the atmosphere itself. As you float in the absolute dark, you become aware of a continuous low-frequency hum of the heavy, oxygen-rich wind. This wind is not blowing here on the surface of the black water. Down here, deep within the tangled roots and the unrotting peat bogs, the air is perfectly, terrifyingly still. The fog does not swirl, it simply hangs, suspended in a state of permanent stasis. The wind is moving through the upper canopy, miles above. Because the trees of this era grew to such impossible heights, supported by the newly evolved, unbreakable lignin in their scaly trunks, the canopy forms a distinct, separate world high above the flooded forest floor. Up there, at the very edge of the stratosphere, the planetary weather systems are churning. A massive, atmospheric tide of dense, heavy air is dragging itself across the supercontinent. But because this air is composed of nearly 35% oxygen, it does not howl or whistle like the thin winds of our modern Earth. It is physically thicker. It is a heavier, more viscous medium. When this heavy, hyperoxygenated wind collides with the millions of interlocking, scaly branches of the canopy miles above, it creates a continuous, low-frequency hum. It is a sound that completely defies the traditional acoustics of a forest. It does not sound like leaves rustling. It sounds like the deep, distant, continuous drone of a colossal engine. It is a massive, planetary vibration that travels down the 100-foot trunks of the scale trees, sinking deep into the submerged roots and resonating out into the dark water of the swamp. This continuous hum is pure, unadulterated brown noise. While white noise contains all frequencies and can sometimes sound harsh or static-like, brown noise emphasizes only the lowest, deepest bass frequencies. It is the sound of heavy ocean surf, the sound of distant, rolling thunder, and the sound of this ancient, heavy wind. This low-frequency hum wraps around you like a heavy, weighted blanket. It does not simply enter your ears. It vibrates directly through your chest, through your bones, and deep into your nervous system. The low-frequency hum of the heavy, oxygen-rich wind acts as a colossal acoustic dampener. It is a massive wall of deep sound that blocks out any stray, anxious thoughts that might try to surface in the quiet of the night. If a massive tree were to fall miles away in the dark, the sharp crack of the splitting wood would never reach you. It would be instantly absorbed, muffled, and entirely swallowed by the continuous, heavy drone of the canopy wind. You are insulated in an acoustic trench, entirely protected from the chaotic, jarring noises of the outside universe. Let us focus entirely on this continuous, low-frequency hum. Imagine the sheer physics required to generate this sound. Millions of tons of heavy, moist air pushing relentlessly against a continent-spanning wall of prehistoric vegetation. The friction of the wind against the diamond-shaped scales of the lepidodendron trees creates a microscopic vibration, a tiny acoustic flutter. Now, multiply that tiny vibration by billions of trees, spanning millions of square miles. The result is a unified, harmonious, and impossibly deep drone. It is the sound of the Earth's atmosphere slowly grinding against its own surface. As you listen to this continuous, low-frequency hum, you can feel the immense weight of the air pressing down softly upon the pitch-black water. The atmosphere of the Carboniferous period is a heavy ocean of gas, and you are resting comfortably at the very bottom of it. The pressure is not crushing, it is deeply comforting. It is the sensation of being tucked in, of having the heavy layers of the world pulled tightly around your shoulders to keep out the cold of the void. Only the faintest, ghostly wisps of gray fog are visible drifting across the lens, a slow visual metronome that perfectly matches the deep, continuous, low-frequency hum echoing from the canopy miles above. The synchronization of these two minimal sensory inputs, the slow drift of the dark gray vapor and the heavy, unending drone of the ancient wind creates an inescapable loop of relaxation. Your mind is caught in this gentle current, pulled slowly away from the shores of consciousness and drawn out into the deep, still waters of the prehistoric night. Consider the absolute isolation of your position. You are floating above a pitch-black swamp that has remained entirely unchanged for millions of years. Below you, the great scale trees that have fallen into the water do not rot. They sink into the anoxic depths, perfectly preserved in the dark mud, locking away the carbon of the ancient world. They will remain there, undisturbed, slowly turning to stone, long after the dinosaurs rise and fall, long after the ice ages carve the continents, and long after our own modern cities crumble into dust. The environment below you is a monument to perfect unbroken stasis. Nothing changes here, nothing hurries, nothing decays, and above you, the impenetrable roof of the forest canopy blocks out the stars, the moon, and the chaotic radiation of the cosmos. The giant, buzzing insects and the heavy, armored amphibians are completely silenced, yielding to the overwhelming power of the night. You are sandwiched between the unrotting, eternal earth below and the heavy, humming sky above. You are completely untethered from the demands of time. The continuous, low-frequency hum of the heavy, oxygen-rich wind moving through the upper canopy miles above is a lullaby that has not been heard on this planet for 300 million years. It is a sound that was lost to the shifting of tectonic plates, the drying of the global swamps, and the thinning of the atmosphere. But tonight, in this quiet corner of alternate time, the ancient wind has been resurrected just for you. It is blowing across the top of the world, carrying away the stress, the exhaustion, and the frantic pace of the modern day. Watch the pitch-black screen. Wait for the faintest, ghostly wisps of gray fog to materialize from the dark. Follow their slow, lazy trajectory as they drift across your vision and fade back into the absolute nothingness. Let your breathing slow to match their glacial pace. Inhale the thick, imaginary, oxygen-rich air. Feel it fill your lungs with a heavy, calming warmth. Exhale and let your body sink deeper into the soft, supporting mattress of the dark. The wind will not stop. The canopy will not open. The fog will not lift. The blanket of the swamp has been thrown over the world, and the command to rest is absolute. Surrender to the deep, continuous hum. Let the heavy, ancient night wrap around your mind, and allow the profound, unbroken stillness of the Carboniferous period to guide you down, 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 into the deepest, most rejuvenating slumber. We have traveled incredibly deep into the heart of the ancient world. We have drifted through the hyperoxygenated ocean of air, floated past the towering, scaly trunks of the unrotting giants, and witnessed the slow, graceful movements of the majestic, gentle creatures that rule this heavy fog. The journey has been one of gradual, continuous descent to sinking away from the frantic, buzzing energy of the modern surface, down into the quiet, warm, and eternal stasis of the Carboniferous period. Now, we have reached the ultimate threshold. The massive, scaly branches of the canopy above us have completely interlocked, forming an impenetrable, living roof that shuts out the final, dying embers of the prehistoric twilight. The sky no longer exists here. The towering silhouettes of the giant ferns and the heavy floating logs have all dissolved into the crushing velvet shadow. Look into the space surrounding you. There's nothing left for your eyes to process. The environment has transitioned into perfect, unbroken darkness. This is not the tense, terrifying darkness of an unknown room. This is the warm, heavy, and profoundly protective darkness of the deep earth. It is a visual sanctuary. In your waking life, your eyes are relentless engines of processing, forced to translate millions of photons, sharp edges, glowing screens, and frantic movements every single second. Even when you close your eyes, the residual glare of the day often lingers behind your eyelids, a chaotic static of light and shape. But here, in the ancient swamp, the sensory deprivation is absolute and completely pure. Allow your visual cortex to finally, completely power down. The perfect, unbroken darkness wraps around your mind like a heavy, weighted blanket. There's nothing hiding in the shadows because the shadows have consumed everything. You are suspended in a state of flawless, absolute night. Let the tiny muscles around your eyes uncoil. Let the tension in your brow melt away. You do not need to watch the world anymore. The world is resting, and it is entirely safe for you to rest with it. As the visual world is entirely erased, the auditory landscape begins its final, beautiful retreat. For millions of years, the soundtrack of this world has been the continuous, heavy dripping of condensation falling from the scaly branches, and the deep, resonant percussion of swamp gas rising from the unrotting depths. But as the absolute night takes hold, the physical mechanics of the environment begin to settle into a state of profound stasis. Listen closely to the water. The dripping slows down. The heavy, rhythmic splashes that once echoed through the forest are losing their momentum. The moisture in the air is settling, clinging softly to the dark moss and the ancient bark. The drops fall further and further apart, a heavy splash, followed by a long, stretching silence. Then another, fainter drip, followed by an even longer void. Your mind no longer needs to track the rhythm because the rhythm is gracefully fading away. Beneath the surface of the black water, the earth itself is settling into a deep, uninterrupted slumber. The biological processes of the deep heat are pausing in the cool, heavy dark. The slow, methodical percussion of the ancient earth is coming to an end. The bubbling stops. The cessation of these distinct sounds leaves behind a profound, staggering quiet. It is the sound of an entire planetary ecosystem entering a state of absolute metabolic rest. The giant dragonflies are asleep, clinging to the high branches. The massive amphibians are buried in the warm, soft mud, their heartbeats slowing to a near halt. The great ironclad millipedes are coiled in the dark, perfectly still. You are the only observer left in this ancient, silent world, and the world is asking you to let go. With the dripping faded and the bubbling silenced, the acoustic slate is wiped perfectly clean. But true, absolute silence can sometimes be deafening to a restless mind. Nature abhors a true vacuum, and in the absence of distinct, isolated sounds, the environment reveals its fundamental underlying frequency. What remains is the deep, heavy, continuous brown noise of the endless Carboniferous mist. This is not the sharp, hissing static of white noise. Brown noise is something entirely different. It is the lowest, heaviest, most resonant frequency in the natural world. It is the sound of a distant, massive waterfall entirely muffled by miles of thick forest. It is the sound of the deep ocean churning thousands of feet below the surface. Here, it is the sound of the thick, hyper-oxygenated atmosphere moving in slow, massive currents high above the canopy, completely insulated and filtered by the billions of scaly leaves and the heavy dews. Humid fog. This deep, heavy, continuous brown noise of the endless Carboniferous mist is the ultimate acoustic cradle. It resonates at a frequency that perfectly mimics